Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 92 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive that two of them think doing a podcast called Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea is a pretty neat idea. They are Jeff and Bryan. Hi there, this is Jeff. I'm with my friend Bryan, and this is our summer solstice
bonus episode. Hey Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bryan. How are you?
Well, I'm feeling lost in space.
Lost in space?
Yes. For me, a great movie reference.
It's a different show.
Yes, but we are in space, are we not?
We are in space. But before we start...
Okay.
Have you heard the story of the peacock?
The story of the peacock. No, I don't know that I have.
Oh, beautiful tale. See? How unfunny?
No, you're wrong. I mean, I'm never going to let you go with this. And eventually one day you'll recognize the error of your ways. Now,
okay.
I will say, and I've thought a lot about this, the truly well-applied pun is not something you could sit and listen to as a comedic approach because,
right.
Yes, you're going to get the groan every time because it's a requirement of a pun that you think about it. And the delay between the thought and the response almost precludes laughter.
Right.
Because laughter has a tendency to bubble up inside you because of the excitement of the anticipation. It's funny because it's true. I mean, how many times have we heard that, you know?
Right. With a pun, you have to play it back in your head to get it.
Right. And you want to be, you want to have a response that says, okay, I understand that you're intelligent, but. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention about puns is my favorite author, which we spoke about before, Piers Anthony,
right,
has basically made a living delivering pun after pun after pun. I mean, other than his original book in the Xanth series, which is full of puns, his entire 100-book series, or how many ever books there are at this point, are based on puns.
Right.
One of my favorite titles that he had is A Cruel Lie.
Right.
A Caustic Yarn.
Right.
And that's written in, spelled as cruel, as in the type of darn or darning or knitting, and lie as in the type of soap.
Correct.
Okay. And of course, cruel yarn, caustic.
Yep. Oh, yeah. It's all
it works.
There. Yes.
It works at every level.
In our last episode, we were talking about books and movies and seeing the movie before reading the book. And I had thought that I read a book after seeing the movie, but I had it backwards. Mm-hmm. But I did. Okay. I did. So I have my example now.
Good. I'd love to hear it.
The movie Wonder Boys.
Wonder Boys.
Went to see Wonder Boys, and it was an okay, kind of confusing movie. And you told me how much you liked the book.
Oh, yes.
So I read the book. And as I was reading the book, I was replaying the movie in my head, realizing how actually it was a brilliant movie. But I didn't get it because there was information that I needed that was only in the book that made everything work.
Right.
So it's actually a really good movie and a really good adaptation of the book. Mm-hmm. but you need to read the book if you're going to enjoy that movie. At least that's how it was for me.
Right. And I remember Wonder Boys as having an author who really knew how to parse a phrase, if you will. A beautifully written book.
Yes.
With
yes,
an imaginative sense of detail. That's my recollection. That's why I remember recommending the book, because sometimes it's about the imagery. It's about the author's ability to tell a tale.
Right.
All right. So now I have to admit to being embarrassed. After we did our episode, I was looking through some material and realized that I made a huge omission. I don't know how I got through Martin Freeman without remembering Bilbo Baggins.
Right.
How did I do that? I mean, he was fabulous as Bilbo Baggins.
Yes, I didn't mention him either in that.
Uh-huh. So I feel embarrassed that I missed it. But of course, if you go along with the chronological understanding of who he was, my first exposure would have been Hitchhiker's Guide.
Right. I guess I kind of have a little bit of a confession too, or I don't know what to call it, a correction.
Okay.
I looked through the book for the part, and in the original radio scripts, there is not the word unprobability.
Oh, okay. He
doesn't use improbability or unprobability. He just uses a generic from what protects it.
Oh, okay.
We need the infinite improbability to drive to get through its protections. So it does not use unprobability.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I was saying that they were using unprobability in the radio series when you needed to actually listen, but that is an example that they did not use. The other one's still true, but this one is not.
Right. And as we said, I believe it was added by Adams to allow for the possibility that the Heart of Gold could get through it.
Yes. So I have titled this bonus episode, The 3 Biggest Movie Issues That Changed the Story So Drastically, Sequels Are Very Improbable.
Again, your love of long titles is amazing.
Yeah. Yes. But before we discuss that, I discovered I had something that I had forgotten about, and I don't even remember where or when I got it, but I think it's going to maybe add something to your understanding of the movie.
Okay, very good.
I have a PDF document of the 3rd revised draft of the movie, dated August 8th, 2003.
3rd revised?
Right. I don't have the original or the first revision or the second revision, and I have no idea how many revisions were after this because this is different than the movie.
Okay.
But I'm going to guess that there's a lot of things in here that are actually filmed, and it's the editor that screwed up the movie.
Well, there you go. And wouldn't it have been fun if they'd come out with an unedited version or, a director's cut, if you will?
I am praying for a director's cut or an expanded edition, especially if all of this stuff is in here. Because I'm going to go through some of the stuff I found.
Yeah, and it would be exciting. However, aren't they still shooting in film back then? So what's the odds that they still have the celluloid lying around?
I'm sure it exists. If they can remaster Gone with the Wind, then the Hitchhiker still has to be around.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I bet so.
Here's a list of the jokes in the script that were in the book that I'm sure ended up on the cutting room floor during the editing process.
Okay, great.
When Arthur was in front of the bulldozer, he did the first I heard of it joke with washing windows and charging, here it was 20 quid. And he used Beware of the Leopard. They were all in the script.
Okay.
The part of the lunchtime joke in the bar where he said they have a place for you in Reader's Digest.
Right.
That was in the original script.
Wow.
One of the ones that I was really upset that they cut out, like, why did you cut this one out, is when they end up in the Vogon ship, Arthur asks if we're safe, and Ford says yes, and says where they are. In the script, he says the strange usage of the word safe joke. That was originally in the script. Editor cut it out. But in the movie, if you remember, they end up in the bathroom.
Right.
And to me, that is because what was in the script that I have that they cut out was Arthur talking about how squalid everything was, and he couldn't believe this was a real spaceship.
Right, right.
So if you say bathroom, then you expect it to be squalid. So then they could get rid of...
Right, at least in a men's room, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Arthur looked up in the guide to see what it said about Earth, and it said harmless.
Right.
That got cut out.
Right.
The proof of the non-existence of God after talking about the Babelfish, that was in the script.
Okay.
At the end, Vogan Gelt saying death is too good for them because he said counterpoint the surrealism of the underlying metaphor. That was in the original script. 2 other ones. One of them was, I didn't listen to what my mother told me.
Oh, I love that.
That was in there. Yep, it was in there. Cut out. And ask a glass of water. That got cut out.
Wow. Oh, yeah, those are good.
Yes. Then there were a couple of added lines that weren't in the book that made the movie and then got cut out of the movie. In the bar, Arthur says, this is shaping up to be a crap day.
Okay.
And Ford says, it's about to get a lot crappier. And then, because this is not the 70s anymore, after they tell the story of Ford and how he thought cars were the dominant life form, and Arthur saved him, Arthur says, and that's why you're named after a discontinued car from the 70s.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah. Cut out of the script.
Okay. Oh, it just makes you wonder. I mean, did they shoot these scenes, like you say, and they're on the editor's floor?
Yeah, from what I understand, when they're doing a movie, they shoot all kinds of material, and then they just cut it. And that's why there's a director's cut.
Right.
Because the director doesn't like what the editor did, because he shot all these scenes that got cut out.
Right, right.
When they were at the party, and Tricia says everybody keeps calling her Santa, in this script, she says Sherlock.
Sherlock.
Yes. I just thought that was weird.
Yep.
In all capital letters, the script says gigantic yellow spaceship. They didn't listen.
Nope, they didn't.
You liked Marvin's line when Zaphod says freeze.
Yeah.
In this original script that I have, Marvin says what it says out of the book, which is, do you mean sit in a corner and rust or just fall apart here where I'm standing?
Right.
But I like the Star Trek ripoff line better. When Ford was asking about Zaphod carving up his brain, in the movie, Zaphod said that parts of his personality were not exactly presidential.
Yes.
In the script, this is something I'm specifically mentioning because this is what we're going to talk about later.
Okay.
When Ford asks Zaphod about carving up his brain in the script, he says, yes, I think. And I think I did it in such a way that it wouldn't be detected by the government screening tests. Or by me. So what's so secret that I can't let anybody know it? Not the galactic government? Not even myself? And the answer is, I don't know, obviously. But I put a few things together, and that's when I realized I had this. And he holds up the blue cube that eventually actually gets them to Voodvodel 6, not Magrathea.
Right.
That was kind of interesting that they went and they specifically put in there all of that stuff that's so important that just got cut out.
Right, right.
They still had the same Magrathean public archive of Deep Thought, but it's the full version with Deep Thought talking about all the other computers.
Okay.
But they still cut it off before they say Earth is the name of the computer.
Right.
And here's something they cut out. It differs from the book, but it's important to the story the movie is telling.
Mm-hmm.
In the script, during the part after showing of the archive, and Zaphod is talking about looking for the question, Ford said this line, but you don't know the name of the computer that other computer was talking about.
Oh, okay.
These are all things that would have been helpful to somebody not familiar with the story.
Right, right. Interesting.
There were a lot of other segments that were cut out, but they were not in the book. Nothing seemed really worthy of staying in, except a few lines. Here's one. The confrontation with Humma was expanded.
Okay.
During it, Arthur tells Ford that he has the feeling that Zaphod is going to get them all killed.
Okay.
Ford says, probably because it's very possible. Just don't save me, okay? We're even. So,
he actually says that in the script, huh?
Yes. It's like, don't save me again, because then I'll owe you again. After Trillian is taken to the Vogue sphere, they did a bastardized version of turning Eddie into the matriarchal personality.
Okay.
And the mice did not disable the navigation. It was Eddie and his matriarchal personality that was keeping him from going to Vogue sphere.
Okay.
And that whole scene would have been disappointing because all of the wrong people were saying the wrong lines. So I'm kind of glad they didn't do it incorrectly. The thinking cap didn't use lemons.
Okay.
Then I came across this bit of cut dialogue that gave meaning to a previous scene. Slarty Bartfast says, "The galaxy was a bit of a shambles. Everyone is enjoying themselves being singers and comedians and really creative and interesting things like that. No one doing the boring jobs." Arthur says, "Oh, you had that problem too." Slarty Bartfast says, "In spades. So a species was genetically engineered to do the boring jobs." Yeah. Tax inspectors, traffic wardens, government officials. "We were commissioned to build a special planet for them. The problem was, some clever dick made it so anytime any one of the creatures had an interesting idea, it would get a hefty smack around the face."
Oh, gosh.
Arthur says, "What? You did that? I've been there." Slarty Bartfast says, "Then I gather you've met some of the inhabitants." Arthur says, "The Vogons." Slarty Bartfast says, "Relentless blighters." That whole scene that didn't make any sense of why they were getting slapped in the face was explained, and they cut it all out.
Yep, I wonder if they thought it would make it less funny.
I don't know. How? No.
I mean, if you have to explain a joke, every time you have to explain one, then it does become less funny.
Not a slap in the face. Just ask Will Smith.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
I'll cut that out.
Oh, groan. Now I'll talk about negative humor.
Yes.
I still think it was a setup, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Here are two scenes that were cut that I would have liked to have seen kept in. The first, because it's funny, and the second one, because it helps those who get lost in the story.
Okay.
Slarty Bartfast said about Earth that it was destroyed shortly before the completion for the purpose for which it was built. 10 minutes later, we would have been free and clear. But we gave them our standard 10 million year warranty, and they have come here to retrieve the backup copy.
I love that. 10 million year warranty.
Yes. 10 minutes before it was over.
Well, of course, that's not the way it ever works for a real human being. It's always 10 minutes after it's over. Right. And then there was a part where Arthur does kind of a story so far to catch people up if they got lost in the story. Mm-hmm.
And now here it is. Here is a scene that was cut that I found fascinating, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it.
Okay.
Arthur says, "I'm sorry, when you say the only living native, do you mean me? What about her?" And Benji Mouse says, "We performed some rudimentary DNA tests on the ship. She's half native. Her real father was a Blahardid, the hyper-intelligent, yes carelessly nomadic race native to the planet Olbed, who apparently popped into Earth for a one-nighter with a Mrs. Frances McMillan." Trillian says, "Which explains a lot. That was a problem I had with the radio scripts, where Trillian was not included in that last on Earth, and it was only Arthur's brain that he wanted.
Right.
And here, they've answered it and then cut it out.
Yeah, that's interesting. But, I could see why they would edit that out. Again, and that's what we're about to talk about. It kind of creates a dead end for Trillian anyway.
Right. I'm almost to the end here. So
30 minutes in, and I think the longest sentence I put together is, yes, uh-huh.
Well, this is just where you were supposed to listen.
I know.
Here's a change that I'm glad they made. In the script, when Marvin shoots the Vogon police with the point of view gun, they all say, "What's the point?" and turn their own guns on themselves and shoot. So, mass suicide of the Vogon army or police is not what I wanted to see.
There you go.
After the whole thing is over with the mice and they come out and they get confronted by the Vogon police on the surface of Magrathea, you're like, well, how did they get there? In the movie, there is a scene where they are attacked by missiles, but a few of the ships get through.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And then the last thing is that the cinematic life cycle montage used an instrumental version of So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. And the script wants to use What a Wonderful World like the radio series and the TV show did.
Right.
Okay, now we'll give you a chance to talk. I thought that was all very fascinating, of some of the things that were left in, some of the things that were cut out, some additional things that were added that ended up getting cut out. I was very happy to read through that and be able to find all that stuff.
Yeah, I'd be curious to find out, as you said, that was the third iteration of the script. I wonder what iteration of the script they actually used and what is on the floor of the editor's desk.
Yeah. Okay, Brian, now let's discuss the parts of the movie that were so drastically changed that the sequels are improbable. I want to start with Deep Thought being located on the planet of Magrathea, because that's the one that I have the most problems with.
Right, and we even mentioned this a little bit in the podcast and thought that this would provide enough fodder for a long discussion.
Yes. Deep Thought was created 17.5 million years ago by the hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings to find the ultimate answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. Then they built another computer to find the ultimate question, and that was Earth.
Right.
Because these hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings are merely protrusions into our dimension, like we talked about before, it is unlikely that they would build their computer in this dimension.
Right.
Deep Thought was programmed 7.5 million years before the Earth was needed to be built on Magrathea.
Correct.
So why would it have ended up on Magrathea?
Yeah, the whole idea that Deep Thought is on Magrathea is very improbable.
Yes, absolutely.
I do have sort of a response in when we talk about can it be reconciled, but it just doesn't make any logical sense that it would be on the same planet.
So why don't we just jump to can it be reconciled right now?
Okay. All right. So here's one thing that I have thought about a lot since watching the movie. Okay.
All right.
They're standing there at the portals on Magrathea.
Yes.
We make an assumption that's clearly the obvious assumption that once Trillian and Ford and Zaphod go through that portal, that they are simply on another part of Magrathea. It could easily be assumed that it is an interdimensional portal and they are in fact in another universe, in another dimension, on another planet when they land there in front of Deep Thought. So they are not in fact on Magrathea. They are in fact, like I said, in another universe, on another planet, in the presence of Deep Thought.
Okay.
Now, the obvious question then becomes, well, how the heck did that happen? And when they are assaulted, all we see is a door opening and nothing. So
Right.
that door opening obviously could have been on that planet, and the pan-dimensional beings that actually inhabit that world where deep thought is could have then captured them and returned them to Magrathea.
Right. Okay, yes. I see that.
Right. And the qualifying bit here that could prove this to be the intention is that the book states that the mice had to return to Magrathea in order to return to their dimension.
Right, because they do talk about that. Yes.
Right. So, I mean, the average moviegoer is not going to make that assumption. And we didn't make that assumption because we're aware, the only reason we can make that assumption is because we know much more detail about the book and the intention of the book. But the average person's going to assume that deep thought is sitting on Magrathea somewhere.
Okay, so you're saying that it's actually not on Magrathea. The portal took them to another dimension, and the bright light brought them back. That
right.
I like that. That actually makes sense. I like your answer more and more and more and more. Because the more I think about it, the place where deep thought was, well, I guess it did kind of look like Magrathea. I'm trying to think if he shows up anywhere. If deep thought shows up in any shot of Magrathea other than the one time that they're with Zaphod and Trillian and Ford. But I don't think it does.
Right.
So, yeah, I think you are correct. And I don't know if we need to talk about any other problems because you've solved it.
Well, like I said, it's only solved because of a deep understanding of the context of the books.
Correct.
Not because of what happened in the movie. The movie leaves it completely open.
Yes, it does.
So, again, can it be resolved or reconciled? I guess the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But it certainly needs some explanation, I think.
It does need some explanation, but that is a good reconciliation, and it doesn't break any other threads down the line. It keeps everything how it should be. So, no, I like that. I'm glad we've had this conversation now because...
We feel better with the director's choices, right? Maybe not the editors, but certainly the director.
Right. They could have done something a little bit different, and the only thing I guess that they should have done different is that the Magrathean Public Archive shouldn't have really been a Magrathean Public Archive. Why would... I guess it could still be the Magrathean Public Archive because they were the ones that did all of the Earth building for them, but if all of it happened in another dimension, it'd have been interesting if it was some different archive that they had.
Yes.
Okay, so we have our next problem was Zaphod's motivation for stealing the Heart of Gold has changed from finding Magrathea to finding the ultimate answer. An added wrinkle is Zaphod is supposed to always have two heads.
Yes.
I will read the what is wrong with all of that.
Okay, good, because there's a lot wrong.
In the book, Ford and Zaphod are arguing whether or not the planet is Magrathea.
Right.
And Ford asks him, what do you want with it anyway? And Zaphod said the same thing he talks about the question, partly the curiosity, partly adventure, mostly the fame and money.
Right.
So the movie's really not that far off from the book in that regard.
Right. So when Zaphod pulls out his little magic cube and shows the Magrathean newsreel or whatever you want to call it, that does take away the whole mythological nature of what we understood Magrathea to be.
Correct, because there's an archive that he has.
Right, exactly. So when it comes to this particular situation and his motivation, this one's a killer. I mean, it doesn't allow, in my mind, a reconciliation. I mean, the only other time that the books really kind of discuss the entire question, of course, is when Arthur and Ford are on ancient Earth. We wouldn't have Zaphod there under those conditions, so where would Zaphod go with this motivation from here?
Well, that is why I was happy I found that other script that had parts that were cut out. Mm-hmm. Because within the context of this movie and the context of the book, there's not too much to be reconciled about the motivation. Because the mice do orchestrate the journey to Magrathea. Mm-hmm. And as the books continue, we learn Zaphod's true motivation, finding the man who rules the universe. The same thing that can be done with the book can be done here. Because in the book, the first book where we talk about Magrathea, Zaphod doesn't know about the man who rules the universe. That doesn't come in until Restaurant.
Right.
So the horrible part is they cut out that whole segment where Zaphod was explaining how he doesn't really know why. And
right. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
If they would have kept that in, it would have been easier to tie in his real motivation later in a sequel.
Yeah, and
they can still do it.
I still think you're right. I think there's a potential for that part to come out in the sequel. He can have that same conversation in the second movie with Ford. They could be even sitting at the restaurant at the end of the universe and have that conversation so that we understand that what he thought was his original motivation wasn't in fact the one driving him forward. So I guess there is a potential for reconciliation under those circumstances.
And the last part that I had, and to me this is the biggest one, Arthur and Trillian end up together at the end.
Okay. So are you going to explain to all of our listeners what's wrong with that?
I will.
All right.
Every continuing story ever told with an arc of will they or won't they get together has gotten worse after they've gotten together.
Right. Right.
Now, if they got together after the 5th book or whatever, that would be fine because the story's over. Mm-hmm. But by getting together now, it can only get worse. And here's why it would get worse.
Okay.
Because Douglas Adams is no longer around to decide the direction it goes. Mm-hmm. If they're going to do a sequel with his original material, one of two things will have to happen. Neither one of them which I want to see. First, cooped up on the miniature heart of gold in Zaphod's pocket, they're going to get on each other's nerves and break up.
Right.
Who wants to watch that? Nobody wants to watch that.
Oh, come on now. See?
By showing us that they broke up, being cooped up on the heart of gold, would lessen the blow for when they are separated and Arthur and Ford go to prehistoric Earth and Trillian goes wherever she does to the Rotary Club.
Well, let me step back here just a little bit and say that when you ask the question, what is wrong with this ending? I'm going to say there's nothing wrong with this ending. It was always something that was considered the logical conclusion to the story. I mean, the first time we see them together, we assume that that's going to be the result. I mean, literally, they are the only two people left from the planet Earth. So what could the other logical conclusion be? Well, obviously, Adams had a different conclusion, but we as watchers and listeners and readers have always assumed that that would be the ultimate answer here. And as we go forward, when we start talking about the rest of the material that we have from Adams, we'll find about what causes problems and what those problems are and how they get defined and redefined and the story of how Arthur actually continues his life. Then my answer to the reconciliation is, yes, of course there's the reconciliation for this part, because a new movie plot is going to unfold with the same logical love story plot line. Arthur will do something stupid to alienate Trillian, and of course then he's going to have to do something heroic to win her back. So that's easily reconciled in a new movie.
Oh, yes, I will say that that's possible, but knowing what we've already talked about, which would just be Restaurant,
right?
We know that it's many, many years that Arthur It's a while. It's a long time before he and Trillian get back together.
Yes, it is.
If we have to watch their story and the relationship blossom and bloom and be all wonderful, only to get them separated when Arthur and Ford go to prehistoric Earth, that's another gut punch. But it would explain why Arthur decided to remain alone instead of hooking up with one of the Gulgafrinchans.
Right.
Because that never made sense to me. Why he would just stay by himself.
Well, I thought he was with the marketing director and her moody lit tubes of toothpaste.
For a little while, I guess. Till she went off on a raft. Which is going to be talked about in the next episode.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there you go. I mean, if you look at it optimistically, you might find one direction. If you look at it, I don't know, I wouldn't say pessimistically, but, there's other ways to go.
Yeah, I'm just saying that if you want a sequel that uses the original material, Arthur is going to have to assume the role that Zaphod has right now, where he is just totally upsetting and alienating Trisha.
Right, and it's funny because when we were talking about this, I think it was when we recorded the original podcast here about the movie, you specifically mentioned Trillian's facial expression and her anxiety that she went through prior to going through the portal.
Correct.
And that, to me, was a pivotal moment in her understanding and relationship with Arthur. Because she's wanting Arthur, or one of the men in her life, Zaphod, anyone really, to take a leading role. And they aren't. So she then commits herself to being her own hero.
Correct. And
jumps through the portal.
Yes.
So I see that as part of that whole love story plot. Okay, here's an exposure. My wife loves Hallmark and Hallmark movies.
Right.
And we have discussed this on infinitum, that at this point she could write these movies because they all follow the same dynamic plot.
Right.
And we know what to anticipate. But here again, we shouldn't in the case of this next movie because it is Adams. And he does always twist it around on its side.
Correct. All right, Brian, so I think we're in agreement that the movie on a whole probably suffered from extreme editing.
Yes, especially based on your observations of the script earlier.
Yes, we live in a time now that a 2.5 or 3 hour superhero movie is commonplace.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I think they've gotten longer.
So pushing this movie to 2 hours, or 2 hours and 15 minutes, and giving it an extra half hour or so of material wouldn't be out of the ordinary for what people are used to watching.
Not today, that's true.
And if they kept in some of the things that they edited out that I mentioned in the beginning, and possibly added a piece that really explained that the portal brought them to a different dimension, and the Flash, when they were attacked, as they said, brought them back to our dimension, that would round things out nicely.
Right. And I even thought of something funny. Impossible, but funny. If they had shown up on Deep Thought as mice.
That would have been brilliant. That would have been absolutely brilliant.
I thought that would have been good.
Yes. I don't know how they would have carried the gun, but...
That's the problem.
Well, if they all found the gun and all 3 mice climbed up on the gun, and then the Flash happened,
yep,
and they went back, the gun would have then been full-sized.
Or we could imagine them as human-sized mice. I mean...
Yes, that, as funny as that sounds, I think it would have been a lot of head shaking going, oh, that was the wrong decision. That was the wrong decision.
Oh, I know. There's nothing creepier in my mind than anthropomorphized rodents. I mean, I just,
Yes.
They just creep me out more than anything.
So I guess this is our plea. It is 2022 right now. That means you have 3 years for the 20th anniversary of the movie. Mm-hmm. So you've got 3 years to put together an extended editor's, director's cut, however you want to call it, that's going to expand the movie into what it should have been in the first place.
Hear, hear.
Should we start a petition?
Hear, hear. Let's see it come to fruition.
Okay, we'll start a petition. We'll put an online petition.
Yeah, there was a funny little meme I saw the other day. Don't judge a book by its movie.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so I think we've come to the end of another bonus episode.
Okay, Jeff. Then say goodbye, Jeff.
So long. Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Oh, please.
No. Thank you for listening to Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. Look for us the first Thursday of every month for a full episode. We will also release a bonus episode later in the month. A very special thanks goes out to Luke, Max, Greg, and Tim Lesnick for arranging and performing our opening theme. We would also like to thank our talented friends and family for their voice work on our introductions and commercials. Visit our website at digitalwatchesareaprettyneatidea.buzzsprout.com, where you can find links to all my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy inspired t-shirt designs. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube as Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea, on Instagram as Watches Idea Podcast, and on Twitter at Watches Idea. If you'd like to contact us, our email is digitalwatchespodcast@gmail.com.
This has been a Froods for Thought production.